Hi, Dr. Nicole LaPera, holistic psychologist here. Thank you guys for subscribing to my channel. If you guys like what you see and you have not subscribed, please feel free to do so. Turn on your notifications. Every Sunday, I will be putting out a new YouTube video. So today, I want to talk about the dreaded but really helpful concept of boundaries. I get a lot of messages about boundaries. I struggle myself with boundaries. This is a tough one. This has to do, obviously, of course, with relationships. What boundaries simply are rules, in a sense, teaching people where our lines, where our limits, how we want to be spoken to, talked to, what we're willing to do or not do. I mean, this, is a pretty big bag, but essentially it's where are our limits? How do we want to see ourselves or experience ourselves in relationships? So I've broken this down into 3 big steps: create, state, and maintain. So in order to create boundaries, it is incredibly important for each of us as individuals to give a think, have some meditation, consider the relationships in our life, the ones that are going well, the ones that we struggle with, and to define for ourselves shifts or changes that would be helpful. So for instance, I think it's really important to get in touch with your why. Right? So why am I considering changing the way that I am in this relationship? What changes might I need to make in terms of this relationship to get my why actualized? So to use myself as an example, I come from an intensely codependent, enmeshed family. I obviously was not aware of this. As I grew up and matured, I started to see the ways that I was acting in all of my other relationships. So my romantic relationships, my friendships, etc., that were very similar to the way that I was in my family unit, meaning I had a level of dependency. I didn't have, if you will, a full, secure, separate, independent self. So my why was I need boundaries in relationships, particularly with family members, so that I can be independent. So that was my why. Connecting with that why was incredibly helpful to keep me taking those next 2 steps, implementing my boundaries, because this is hard. But I was so clear on my why and knew that it was so important that I make those changes, because by this point I had accumulated a whole lot of evidence of what operating in that more dependent way brought me in relationships, and it wasn't good. I was always focused on someone else. I didn't feel like my needs were being met. I felt not heard, not understood. I mean, really the list goes on. So for me, I realized that in order to develop an independent, separate self in all my relationships, I needed to start to make small changes. So I gave some thought into what they would be. So that meant that I would have to consider myself when I was taking calls, making plans, playing functions in relationships, etc., etc. So I got honest with myself, and I looked at the relationships that I felt particularly challenged in. So I'm going to use just one specific relationship to highlight some of these changes that I then started to implement. So I realized that to be a separate and develop a separate independent self, I would have to first start being a little less available. So the person that popped into my head that I felt ever available and on call to was my sister. She would call me for everything under the sun. Sometimes they were what felt like a more crisis, and most of the time they were just small little bumps in the road. But regardless, my phone would ring, I'd get a text. I was always on the other end, and that's where I came in, right? Me having to be honest and realize that I was the one answering those texts. I was the one not having a boundary. So what did that mean? That meant that I needed to start to be a little less available. So using her as an example, I then am now on step 2. I'm clear. I know this is important. I can imagine how I would feel differently, not only with her, but with all of my relationships. So I decided I was going to do something. And what I was going to do, like I said, was be a little less available. So step 2, state it. Right? So looked a little something like this. Hey, sis, I have a lot going on in my world, and I actually need to not be, kind of always at the end of the phone call or the text for you. There are some days where, quite honestly, I'm tired, I'm drained, and I just don't have anything left. So on those days, I'm not going to be able to be available to you, right? You can say this in any way. The most important part, though, is that you are able to separate yourself in that moment or in following moments from whatever the reaction is. Meaning, this could be something that is accepted and heard and understood until you obviously try to implement, and then we'll talk about that later. Or this could be something that's argued about or combated with or not understood. There could be a million different reactions on the other end of stating this new boundary. A couple different reasons. One of the reasons is this person likely is used to you in one way. And now here you are saying, hey person, I'm not gonna be that way that you're used to me anymore. I'm gonna be this new way. That can bring up and trigger a million different feelings in this other person. The point of this step 2 though is, so we've stated what we need, and then if we can, to the best of our ability, we're going to separate from whatever the reaction is of this other person, right? Because it could be accepting, like I said, and it could be some combativeness. Again, this, and like I will always say, another person kind of in their feelings in these moments aren't our responsibility. We're already doing something that's hard. I can imagine, I know it was for me, saying this was hard. It was like one of those, I wrote the text and I threw my phone type of things. Like, this isn't easy. So we need to respect ourselves and the feelings that at this point are probably really going to start coming up for us. So for me, I already had my feel bads and my guilt setting in when I delivered the message. I didn't even do it yet. Which brings me to step 3. I've stated it, now I have to maintain it. Meaning, when that next text comes in or phone call comes in, that I actually do what I said I'm going to do, right? And I don't pick it up, or I'm not responsive immediately. I wait for tomorrow or the next day to, kind of give that response. This is critically important because there are, like I said, so many ways that the person on the other side does not like this new dynamic that we're shifting into. There are going to be feelings that come up for this person. And you might get to hear about them, and they're probably not going to feel good. And that could back us up into a corner where we could feel like we need to go back into this old way of being. That is a really bad message to send, because what that is doing on some level is reinforcing this other person that if they kick and scream, just using figurative words, but if they kick and scream enough, that we'll go back to doing as they want. Remember, relationship dynamics just take time. They can. This relationship that feels really conflictual right now because we're trying to be a new way in it, over time could go and turn into the most balanced, fulfilling relationship for many of you. So it's incredibly important to weather the difficulty now. And I'm the first one to admit, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. Like I said, here's another hurdle where my feel bads came in, my guilt. My sister at one point called me selfish, right, for not being available. I really had to take a moment without responding to her when she was saying these things to me and ask myself some more questions. Okay, well, she thinks I'm selfish. Is that a problem? Am I selfish? Do I consider myself to be selfish? My answer was no. I did not feel I was a selfish person. I felt, because I took the time, right, at this stage of creating, that I was having detrimental effects, not only in the relationship with her, but my other relationships, because I wasn't putting myself on a priority list. So thinking about it through my lens, I did not think I was selfish. If I did, or if I even considered trying on selfish, I would come to the conclusion that it's not so bad either. Another great question is, okay, well, if this were to be true, whatever the person is saying now about me, because they do not like, right, this new dynamic, I could really explore it, try it on. Okay, well, if this is true, how would this be a problem for me? What would it mean for me, right? I think this is important because, like I said, once we've been able to maintain it and resist the urge to go back into our old habit with this person, now we just have more, kind of information and self-exploration that we can do, that we can try to understand ourselves better. But like I said, incredibly important to maintain those boundaries, because each time we don't, we give the person the okay to push back in that way to continue to elicit that same behavior. And like I said, relationship dynamics can change over time. The function that we once played for someone, so me being ever available to my sister, if I'm able to maintain my boundary before I know it, this relationship will settle into a new dynamic, one where she doesn't expect me to be ever available to her anymore, because that's the responsibility in creating boundaries that I have to hold. I played a part in allowing this relationship to get to where it is now. I said yes all of those times. I was always there. So now, because I want to create my independence, I want to be separate, which means I have to be less connected. I have to be less available. I've stated this. I let everyone know. It's no surprise now. This is what you're going to see or experience different of me. And now I have to continue to be that different person. Boundaries in relationships are hard. I get it. They're a work in progress, but they can go an incredibly long way to not only changing the way we feel about ourselves, our relationships, our worlds. It can be so important to just stick through it, to tolerate all of the discomforts. And like I said, they're going to be different for everyone, and they're going to be there. But the end result of this can be a healthier, happier, more sustainable relationship. So let me know what you guys think of boundaries, what your struggles are, any successes that you've had down below. I'd love to hear from you.